Some mistakes cost you your dignity. Others cost you your career. But when Staff Sergeant Marcus Coleman decided to assert his authority over what he thought was just another quiet kitchen worker, he had no idea he was about to make the kind of mistake that would haunt him forever. In the military, respect isn't just earned through rank, it's earned through actions. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you never see coming. Sarah Mitchell looked like any other civilian contractor working the late shift in the mess hall. Average height, unremarkable appearance, always keeping to herself while cleaning tables and serving meals to tired soldiers. But appearances can be deadly. What Marcus didn't know as he walked into that dimly lit mess hall on a quiet Tuesday night was that he was about to cross a line with someone whose very existence was classified at the highest levels. Someone who had spent the last 8 years becoming a weapon that even the most elite soldiers feared. Someone who belonged to a unit so secret that most military personnel didn't even know it existed. The mess hall security camera would later capture everything. The moment of arrogance that started it all. The split second when confidence turned to confusion. And the aftermath that would send shockwaves through the entire base command structure. This is the story of what happens when an ordinary soldier makes the extraordinary mistake of underestimating the wrong person. A story of hidden identities, secret operations, and the dangerous consequences of assumptions. Because in the world of special operations, the deadliest warriors often hide in plain sight. And sometimes they're serving your dinner. The fluorescent lights in the mess hall buzzed with their usual electrical hum as Sarah Mitchell wiped down the last table of the evening shift. Fort Bragg never truly slept, but at 2,230 hours, the dining facility had settled into its familiar, quiet rhythm. Only the skeleton crew remained, cleaning up after another long day of feeding over 3,000 soldiers, contractors, and support staff. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and purposeful. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another civilian contractor doing her job. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her standard-issue kitchen uniform showed no signs of anything extraordinary. She kept her head down, focused on her work, exchanging only necessary words with her co-workers. Most of the evening staff had grown used to her quiet demeanor over the past 6 months. She arrived on time, did her work without complaint, and left without drawing attention to herself. But Sarah Mitchell wasn't her real name. Her actual identity was buried so deep in classified files that even the base commander didn't have clearance to access her complete record. For the past 8 years, she had been Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun of Naval Special Warfare Development Group, more commonly known as SEAL Team 6. She was one of only 12 women ever to complete the grueling selection process for the Navy's most elite Special Operations Unit, and one of even fewer to survive the psychological conditioning that came with deep cover assignments. 3 months ago, she had been pulling security in a hostile compound in Eastern Europe, eliminating high-value targets with surgical precision. 2 months ago, she was conducting underwater infiltrations in the South China Sea. Now, she was mopping floors and serving mashed potatoes to soldiers who had no idea that the woman refilling their coffee cups had a confirmed kill count that would make most infantry soldiers pale. The assignment was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Military intelligence had identified a potential security breach at Fort Bragg. Someone with access to classified information was selling secrets, and the investigation had narrowed down to personnel with regular access to the mess hall and administrative buildings. Sarah's cover identity as a civilian contractor gave her perfect access to observe without suspicion. Her job was to watch, listen, and identify patterns that might reveal the traitor. She had been trained for this kind of work at the farm, the CIA's covert training facility in Virginia. The art of becoming invisible, of blending so seamlessly into the background that people forgot you existed even while looking directly at you. It was a skill that required more than just acting ability. It demanded a complete psychological transformation, the ability to suppress every instinct that had been honed through years of elite military training. Most special operations soldiers couldn't do it. The hyper-awareness, the constant tactical thinking, the unconscious command presence that came from years of leadership in high-stakes situations. These traits made it nearly impossible to truly disappear into civilian roles. But Sarah had always been different. Even during her time with SEAL Team 6, her teammates had noted her ability to shift between personas with unsettling ease. It was what made her perfect for deep cover work, and what made her dangerous in ways that went beyond her combat skills. As she finished cleaning the last table, Sarah's peripheral vision caught movement near the kitchen entrance. Staff Sergeant Marcus Coleman entered the mess hall with the swagger that came from 8 years of military service and a recent promotion. He was built like a linebacker, standing 6 feet 2 inches tall with broad shoulders and arms that strained against his uniform sleeves. His blonde hair was cut in a precise high and tight, and his pale blue eyes carried the kind of confidence that came from never having been seriously challenged. Marcus had arrived at Fort Bragg 6 months ago, transferred from a transportation unit in Germany. His record was solid, if unremarkable, good performance reviews, no disciplinary issues, and a reputation as someone who got things done. He had quickly established himself as an unofficial leader among the enlisted personnel, the kind of soldier that junior enlisted looked up to and senior NCOs appreciated for maintaining order in the ranks. But Marcus had a problem with authority when it came to civilians. He had grown up in a small town in Alabama where respect was earned through strength and maintained through dominance. The military had channeled those instincts productively, giving him structure and purpose. However, when it came to civilian contractors, especially those he perceived as beneath his station, those old patterns reasserted themselves. Sarah continued her cleaning routine, but her training kicked in automatically. She cataloged Marcus's approach vector, noted the slight alcohol smell that suggested he'd been drinking but wasn't intoxicated, and observed the body language that indicated he was looking for some kind of interaction. Her peripheral vision tracked his movement, while her conscious mind maintained the appearance of focused attention on her cleaning supplies. Marcus approached the coffee station, which Sarah had cleaned 20 minutes earlier. He poured himself a cup, added sugar, and stirred it slowly while watching her work. His presence had a weight to it, the kind of intimidating aura that he used effectively to maintain discipline among younger soldiers. He was used to people being aware of him, used to commanding respect through sheer physical presence. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing to a section of table that Sarah had already cleaned twice. His voice carried the tone of authority, the expectation that civilian contractors should defer to military personnel regardless of rank or actual authority over the dining facility. Sarah looked up from her cleaning supplies and followed his pointing finger to the perfectly clean table. Her brown eyes showed no recognition of challenge or intimidation, just the mild attention of someone receiving instruction. "I'll take care of it," she said in a neutral tone, reaching for a cleaning cloth. Marcus stepped closer, positioning himself in what military personnel would recognize as a dominance display. His size advantage was substantial, and he used it to crowd her personal space in a way that would make most people uncomfortable. "You need to pay more attention to detail," he said, his voice carrying an edge. "This isn't some civilian job where you can slack off. Standards matter here." The irony of the moment was lost on Marcus. He was lecturing someone whose attention to detail had kept her alive through missions where a single mistake would have meant death. Sarah's standards were so high that she could field strip and reassemble a rifle blindfolded in under 2 minutes, navigate through hostile territory using only star positions, and identify potential threats from facial microexpressions faster than most people could process what they were seeing. But Marcus saw only what her cover identity wanted him to see, a civilian contractor who was beneath his notice except as a target for the kind of petty authority he enjoyed exercising. He had no way of knowing that Sarah had identified 17 potential security vulnerabilities in the mess hall within her first week of work, or that she had already compiled detailed psychological profiles of every person she had regular contact with. Sarah nodded and began cleaning the already spotless table section again. Her movements remained calm and professional, showing no sign of irritation or challenge. This response only seemed to encourage Marcus, who interpreted her compliance as weakness rather than tactical patience. "You know what your problem is?" Marcus continued, settling into the familiar rhythm of someone who enjoyed having a captive audience for his opinions. "You people don't understand what it means to be part of something bigger than yourselves. You just show up, do the minimum, collect your paycheck, and go home. No pride, no commitment." As Marcus spoke, Sarah's training automatically processed threat indicators. His positioning blocked her most direct route to the kitchen exit. His stance suggested someone comfortable with physical confrontation. His verbal aggression was escalating in a pattern consistent with someone working up to more direct action. None of this presented any actual threat to her, but her mission requirements demanded that she maintain her cover identity regardless of personal provocation. "I do my best to meet the standards," Sarah replied, her tone remaining neutral and slightly deferential. It was exactly what Marcus wanted to hear, acknowledgement of his authority and implicit acceptance of his criticism. Marcus smiled with satisfaction and took another step closer. "Your best isn't good enough," he said. "Maybe if you people understood what real discipline looked like, you'd actually contribute something worthwhile instead of just taking up space." The kitchen staff had noticed the interaction by now, but none of them moved to intervene. Marcus's behavior wasn't unusual. Many military personnel treated civilian contractors as second-class citizens, and the contractors had learned to endure the occasional lecture or power display. They assumed Sarah could handle herself, and none of them wanted to create a situation that might affect their own job security. What they didn't realize was that they were watching someone with enough training to end the confrontation in 6 different ways without leaving any evidence of what had happened. Sarah's muscle memory included techniques that could disable an opponent Marcus's size in under 3 seconds, using nothing more than items readily available in any dining facility. But her mission parameters were clear: maintain cover at all costs. Sarah finished re-cleaning the table and began collecting her cleaning supplies. "I should get back to my other duties," she said, starting to move toward the kitchen area. Marcus reached out and grabbed her arm, stopping her movement. "I'm not done talking to you," he said, his grip firm enough to leave marks on someone without her conditioning. "When a soldier is giving you feedback, you listen until they're finished." The physical contact crossed a line that Marcus didn't understand, but that Sarah recognized immediately. In her previous life, putting hands on a fellow special operations soldier without permission was grounds for immediate disciplinary action. In the civilian world, it constituted assault. But in her current situation, it was just another element of the cover identity she needed to maintain. Marcus's grip tightened slightly as he continued his lecture. "People like you don't understand sacrifice. You've never had to put your life on the line for something that matters. You just drift through life without any real purpose or commitment." Sarah's pulse remained steady as she looked at Marcus's hand on her arm, then up at his face. Her expression showed mild discomfort, but no fear or anger. "I understand," she said quietly. "Could you please let go of my arm?" Marcus held her gaze for several long seconds, enjoying the moment of complete control. He was used to this dynamic, civilian contractors who complained about military attitudes, but never had the courage to actually challenge him. In his experience, a show of physical dominance was usually enough to establish the proper hierarchy and ensure future compliance. "Just remember what I've told you," he said, releasing her arm and stepping back. "Standards matter. If you can't meet them, there are plenty of other people who can do your job." Sarah rubbed her arm where he had gripped it, completing the picture of a civilian worker who had been intimidated by military authority. "I'll remember," she said, gathering her cleaning supplies and heading toward the kitchen. As she walked away, Marcus watched with satisfaction. He had handled the situation exactly as he always did, establishing dominance without crossing any legal lines. The civilian contractor had shown proper deference, accepted his guidance, and would presumably improve her performance going forward. It was the kind of leadership he prided himself on, firm but fair, commanding respect while maintaining professional boundaries. Marcus finished his coffee and left the mess hall, completely unaware that he had just made what would prove to be the most dangerous mistake of his military career. He had no way of knowing that Sarah's compliance was a tactical choice rather than genuine submission, or that every word of their interaction had been automatically analyzed and filed away for future reference. Sarah continued her cleaning routine for another 20 minutes, completing her shift with the same quiet efficiency she had shown for the past 6 months. She signed out with the night supervisor, collected her personal items from her locker, and walked to the parking lot where she had left her unremarkable Honda Civic. Once inside her car, Sarah sat quietly for several minutes, allowing herself to process what had just happened. The interaction with Marcus had provided valuable intelligence about his personality and behavioral patterns, but it had also revealed something potentially significant. His confidence in intimidating civilian contractors suggested familiarity with the base power dynamics, and his timing in arriving at the mess hall after hours indicated knowledge of staff schedules that might be relevant to her investigation. More importantly, his willingness to use physical intimidation suggested someone comfortable with pushing boundaries, exactly the kind of personality trait that might correlate with other forms of rule-breaking. Sarah made mental notes of everything she had observed, from his approach patterns to his verbal tells to the way he positioned himself during confrontation. As she drove off the base, Sarah's mind was already working through the implications of the encounter. Marcus Coleman had revealed himself as someone worth closer observation, and she would need to adjust her operational patterns to create more opportunities for intelligence gathering without compromising her cover identity. Behind her, the mess hall settled into its overnight quiet, with no one aware that they had just witnessed the opening move in a game that would have consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine. The security cameras had recorded everything, but the footage would not be reviewed unless something happened to draw attention to it. Something was about to happen. Over the following week, Sarah noticed Marcus's behavior shifting into a more aggressive pattern. He began appearing in the mess hall during her shifts with increasing frequency, always finding reasons to interact with her that seemed designed to establish his authority. Each encounter followed a similar script. He would identify some minor issue with her work, deliver a lecture about military standards, and expect her to accept his criticism with appropriate deference. Tuesday evening, he questioned her table arrangement in the dining area, insisting that the chairs weren't properly aligned despite the fact that she had measured the spacing precisely. Wednesday morning, he criticized the way she was mopping the floor, claiming she was missing corners that had already been cleaned twice. Thursday afternoon, he complained that she wasn't moving fast enough during the lunch rush, even though her efficiency ratings from the kitchen supervisor were among the highest of any contractor on the base. Each interaction lasted longer than the previous one, and Marcus's physical proximity became increasingly invasive. He would stand too close while delivering his critiques, use his size to crowd her personal space, and occasionally make casual physical contact that served no purpose other than to demonstrate his ability to touch her without consequence. The pattern was consistent with someone testing boundaries, gradually escalating his behavior to see how much he could get away with. Sarah documented every interaction in her operational memory, noting the subtle ways Marcus's confidence was growing with each successful intimidation. From a tactical perspective, his behavior was providing valuable intelligence about his personality profile, but it was also creating complications for her mission. The increased attention from Marcus meant that other personnel were beginning to notice their interactions, which could compromise her ability to blend into the background and observe potential security threats. More concerning was what Sarah observed about Marcus when he wasn't focused on her. During his regular interactions with military personnel, he displayed professional competence and appropriate respect for the chain of command. He was popular with junior enlisted soldiers, who appreciated his willingness to provide guidance and support. Several of the civilian contractors mentioned that he had helped them resolve administrative issues or provided useful information about base procedures. This contradiction intrigued Sarah from an investigative standpoint. Marcus's behavior toward her was clearly problematic, but his overall patterns suggested someone who understood boundaries and social expectations. The fact that he chose to ignore those boundaries specifically with her indicated either a particular animus toward her personally or a calculated decision to target someone he perceived as isolated and vulnerable. Friday evening brought the most significant escalation yet. Sarah was working the closing shift, cleaning tables after the dinner service, when Marcus entered the mess hall with two other soldiers. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and Corporal Williams were both from Marcus's unit, and Sarah recognized them as frequent visitors to the dining facility. They were laughing about something as they approached the coffee station, their conversation indicating they had been drinking at the base club before coming to the mess hall. "Hey, Sarah," Marcus called out, using her first name with the kind of familiarity that suggested a relationship that didn't exist. "Come over here for a minute. I want to show Rodriguez and Williams what I was telling them about attention to detail." Sarah continued cleaning the table she was working on, finishing her current task before responding. This was standard operating procedure for her cover identity. Civilian contractors were expected to prioritize their work duties over social interactions. "I'll be right there," she said, gathering her cleaning supplies. As she approached the coffee station, Sarah automatically assessed the tactical situation. 3 military personnel, all larger than her apparent physical capabilities, positioned to block her primary exit route. Marcus appeared to be the leader of the group, with the other two following his lead, but not necessarily committed to whatever he had planned. Their body language suggested they were expecting entertainment rather than serious confrontation. "Show them how you clean a table," Marcus said, pointing to a nearby surface that had already been cleaned. "I want them to see what passes for a professional standard around here." Rodriguez looked uncomfortable with the situation, shifting his weight and glancing between Marcus and Sarah with obvious uncertainty. He was older than the other two, with 15 years of military service and the kind of seasoned perspective that came from multiple deployments. "Marcus, maybe we should just grab our coffee and go," he suggested. Williams, however, seemed entertained by the dynamic. He was young, maybe 22 years old, with the kind of eager confidence that came from wanting to fit in with more experienced soldiers. "Yeah, let's see those civilian contractor skills," he said, grinning at what he apparently saw as harmless hazing. Sarah began cleaning the designated table, her movements efficient and professional. She had learned through her previous interactions with Marcus that compliance was the fastest way to end these encounters without drawing additional attention. The sooner she satisfied whatever demonstration he wanted, the sooner she could return to her actual work. Marcus positioned himself where he could provide commentary for his audience. "See how she's holding the cloth? That's not proper technique. And look at the way she's missing spots." He was pointing out flaws that didn't exist, but his companions had no way of knowing that. This is what happens when you don't have real training and discipline. Sarah continued her work without responding to the criticism. Her face showed the patient tolerance of someone accustomed to dealing with difficult personalities, but her peripheral vision was tracking the positions and reactions of all 3 soldiers. Williams was clearly enjoying the show. Rodriguez was becoming increasingly uncomfortable, and Marcus was building up to something more significant than his usual lectures. "You know what your real problem is?" Marcus continued, warming to his theme. "You don't understand respect. In the military, when someone with authority is talking to you, you look at them, you show proper attention." Sarah finished cleaning the table and looked up at Marcus. "I'm sorry. I was focused on doing the job correctly." "That's better," Marcus said, moving closer to her. "See, guys, they can learn if you're consistent about maintaining standards." He was standing less than 3 feet away now, close enough that Sarah could smell the alcohol on his breath and see the slight unfocus in his eyes that indicated he had been drinking more than he should have. Rodriguez stepped forward slightly, Marcus, I think that's enough. She's just trying to do her job. Marcus turned to Rodriguez with irritation. This is about leadership, Rodriguez. Sometimes you have to make sure people understand where they stand. He turned back to Sarah. Isn't that right? You understand the importance of knowing your place. The question carried implications that went beyond simple workplace hierarchy, and Sarah recognized it as another boundary test. Marcus was pushing to see how far he could go with an audience present, possibly building up to more significant violations of appropriate conduct. Her training included extensive instruction in recognizing escalation patterns, and Marcus was following a textbook progression toward more serious misconduct. I understand the importance of doing good work, Sarah replied, keeping her tone neutral and professional. Williams laughed. Diplomatic answer. I like her. Marcus's expression darkened at Williams's comment. The approval from his audience was supposed to flow toward him, not toward the target of his demonstration. She's not here to be liked, he said. She's here to do a job, and part of that job is showing proper respect for military personnel. Sarah gathered her cleaning supplies, preparing to return to her workstation. I should finish my other duties before my shift ends, she said, starting to move toward the kitchen area. Marcus moved to block her path. I didn't say you could leave yet. His voice had taken on an edge that made Rodriguez take another step forward. Marcus, that's enough, Rodriguez said firmly. She's not under your command, and this has gone far enough. The confrontation between Marcus and Rodriguez created a moment of tactical opportunity. Sarah used the distraction to step around Marcus and continue toward the kitchen, but he caught her arm again, this time in front of witnesses who could see the inappropriateness of the physical contact. When I'm talking to you, you wait until I'm finished, Marcus said, his grip tight enough to be painful for someone without her conditioning. Williams's expression had shifted from amusement to concern. The situation was clearly moving beyond harmless hazing into territory that could result in serious consequences for everyone involved. Marcus, maybe we should head back to the barracks, he suggested. Rodriguez's reaction was more direct. Let go of her arm, Marcus. Right now. Marcus looked at Rodriguez with surprise, apparently not expecting resistance from his companions. The alcohol and his need to maintain face in front of the other soldiers were clearly affecting his judgment. Instead of de-escalating, he tightened his grip on Sarah's arm and squared his shoulders in Rodriguez's direction. Don't tell me how to handle a situation, Rodriguez. I know what I'm doing. Sarah remained calm throughout the exchange, but her tactical assessment was updating rapidly. Marcus's behavior was escalating beyond the pattern she had observed previously, possibly due to the combination of alcohol and peer pressure. Rodriguez was attempting to de-escalate, but might be drawn in a physical confrontation if Marcus continued to assert dominance. Williams was young and uncertain, likely to follow whatever lead was established by the more senior soldiers. Could you please let go of my arm? Sarah asked, directing the question to Marcus, but speaking loud enough for Rodriguez and Williams to hear clearly. This ensured that any witnesses would remember her attempting to resolve the situation peacefully. Marcus held her gaze for several seconds, clearly weighing his options. He was sober enough to recognize that Rodriguez was serious about intervening, but intoxicated enough to resist backing down from what he saw as a challenge to his authority. The grip on Sarah's arm was causing visible indentations in her skin, obvious evidence of inappropriate use of force. Rodriguez took another step closer. Marcus, I'm not going to tell you again. Let her go. The confrontation had reached a critical decision point. Marcus could either de-escalate by releasing Sarah and maintaining his dignity, or he could double down and risk a physical confrontation with Rodriguez that would likely result in disciplinary action for everyone involved. His military training should have guided him toward de-escalation, but his personal need to maintain dominance was pushing him toward continued escalation. Marcus released Sarah's arm, but didn't step back, maintaining his invasive proximity. Fine. But remember what I told you about respect and attention to detail. Those things matter here. Sarah rubbed her arm where he had gripped it, the action visible to all three soldiers. I'll remember, she said, then moved toward the kitchen area to complete her shift. As she walked away, Sarah could hear the beginning of a heated conversation between Marcus and Rodriguez. Their voices were low, but intense, with Rodriguez clearly expressing disapproval of Marcus's behavior, and Marcus defending his actions as appropriate leadership. Williams remained mostly silent, apparently uncomfortable with the entire situation. Sarah finished her closing duties with mechanical efficiency while processing the implications of what had just happened. Marcus had escalated his behavior significantly, moving from verbal intimidation to physical restraint in front of witnesses. Rodriguez's intervention suggested that other military personnel were beginning to notice and disapprove of Marcus's conduct, which could either help control his behavior or push him toward more secretive forms of harassment. More importantly, from an operational standpoint, Marcus's willingness to act inappropriately even with witnesses present indicated poor judgment and impulse control that might extend to other areas of his behavior. These personality traits were consistent with someone who might be vulnerable to recruitment by hostile intelligence services or willing to engage in other forms of misconduct. After completing her shift, Sarah made her normal exit through the employee parking lot. The three soldiers had left the mess hall 15 minutes earlier, but their argument had continued outside where several other personnel had observed the heated discussion. Word of the incident would likely spread through the enlisted ranks quickly, potentially affecting Marcus's reputation and standing with his peers. Sarah drove off base and returned to her apartment, a modest one-bedroom unit that matched her cover identity as a civilian contractor with limited income. The apartment was furnished with generic items that revealed nothing about her real background or capabilities, but hidden throughout were communication devices and other equipment that allowed her to maintain contact with her operational handlers. Once inside, Sarah activated a secure communication protocol and began composing her daily intelligence report. Marcus Coleman's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic and aggressive, suggesting either personal psychological issues or external pressures that might be relevant to her investigation. His willingness to act inappropriately in front of witnesses indicated compromised judgment that warranted closer scrutiny. As she completed her report, Sarah's analysis included recommendations for expanded surveillance of Marcus's off-duty activities and communications. The escalating pattern of harassment might be connected to other security concerns on the base, or might simply represent a disciplinary problem that required administrative attention. Either way, it had become impossible to ignore. Sarah encrypted and transmitted her report, then began preparing for another day of maintaining her cover identity while gathering intelligence about potential security threats. The mission was becoming more complex, but she had handled far more dangerous assignments with fewer resources and less preparation time. What she didn't know was that Marcus had already begun planning his next escalation, and that Rodriguez's intervention had only made him more determined to assert his authority over the civilian contractor who had caused him to lose face in front of his peers. The consequences of that determination would soon become apparent to everyone involved. The next phase of the confrontation was about to begin, and neither Sarah nor Marcus fully understood what they were moving toward. The weekend break did nothing to cool Marcus's anger about the confrontation with Rodriguez. If anything, the time away from base allowed his resentment to build into something more dangerous. He spent Saturday evening drinking at a bar near the base, rehashing the incident with anyone who would listen, painting himself as a misunderstood leader who was simply trying to maintain proper standards. By Sunday night, Marcus had convinced himself that Sarah was the source of all his problems. In his mind, she had deliberately embarrassed him in front of his peers by playing the victim when he was just doing his job. Rodriguez's intervention became proof that she was manipulating the situation to make him look bad. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that she needed to be taught a lesson about respect and consequences. Monday morning brought a new opportunity when Marcus learned that Sarah had been assigned to work the early breakfast shift alone. Budget cuts had reduced the civilian contractor staff, and kitchen supervisors were experimenting with single-person shifts during slower periods. Sarah would be responsible for basic food service and dining area maintenance from 0500 to 0800 hours, with minimal supervision and no other contractors present. Marcus saw this as perfect timing for the kind of private conversation that would settle the situation once and for all. He made sure his own duties would bring him to the mess hall during Sarah's shift, and he spent the weekend planning exactly what he would say to make her understand her place in the base hierarchy. What Marcus didn't realize was that Sarah had specifically requested the early morning shift as part of her intelligence gathering operation. The reduced supervision and foot traffic would give her better opportunities to observe patterns and access areas that were usually crowded during normal operating hours. She had also installed several small surveillance devices in strategic locations throughout the dining facility, equipment that would capture both audio and video of anyone who entered during her shift. Sarah arrived at the mess hall at 0445 hours, 15 minutes before her official start time. She used the extra time to activate her surveillance equipment and review the facility for anything that might have changed over the weekend. Her operational training included constant situational awareness protocols that most people would find exhausting, but that had become second nature to her after years of special operations work. The breakfast service was simple compared to lunch or dinner: coffee, juice, pastries, and basic hot items for early morning personnel. Sarah worked efficiently to prepare the service area while monitoring the facility's security systems and maintaining awareness of anyone approaching from outside. Her enhanced hearing, developed through years of tactical training, allowed her to detect footsteps and vehicles at much greater distances than normal civilians. At 0647 hours, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of boots approaching the mess hall in trance, with the deliberately heavy footfalls of someone wanting their presence to be known. She continued her food service preparations while tracking the approaching individual through audio cues and peripheral vision. When Marcus entered the dining facility, Sarah was restocking coffee supplies behind the service counter. Marcus surveyed the empty mess hall with satisfaction. Perfect conditions for the kind of private discussion that would resolve their ongoing problems. He could see Sarah working behind the counter, focused on her duties and apparently unaware of his presence. Everything was exactly as he had planned. "Good morning, Sarah," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the empty dining room with artificial friendliness. "Looks like you're all by yourself this morning." Sarah looked up from her work and acknowledged him with a neutral nod. "Good morning. Can I get you coffee or breakfast?" Marcus approached the service counter with deliberate slowness, savoring the moment of having her complete attention without interference from other personnel. "Actually, I think it's time we had a real conversation about your attitude and work performance." Sarah continued preparing coffee while responding. "I try to do good work. If there's something specific I can improve, I'm happy to listen." The professional response irritated Marcus because it didn't give him an obvious opening for criticism. He had expected defensiveness or hostility that would justify the confrontation he had planned. Instead, Sarah's calm professionalism forced him to work harder to create the conflict he wanted. "The problem isn't your work," Marcus said, moving around the counter to position himself on the same side as Sarah. This brought him into the food service area, where civilian contractors were normally the only personnel authorized to be present. "The problem is your attitude toward authority." Sarah noted Marcus's unauthorized entry into the food service area, but continued her preparations. "I respect military authority. If I've done something that suggests otherwise, I apologize." Marcus stepped closer, crowding Sarah's workspace and forcing her to work around his presence. "You embarrassed me in front of my people last Friday. That's not acceptable." Sarah's hands remained steady as she continued her tasks, but her peripheral awareness expanded to track Marcus's exact position and movements. "I was just trying to do my job. I didn't mean to cause any problems." The continued calm professionalism was driving Marcus toward greater frustration. He had wanted Sarah to show fear or anger, reactions that would justify his planned escalation. Instead, her composed responses were making him feel foolish, which only increased his determination to provoke the confrontation he needed. "You know exactly what you did," Marcus said, moving to block Sarah's access to the coffee equipment. Playing the victim, making Rodriguez think I was out of line. That was calculated, and I'm not going to let it slide. Sarah stopped her work and looked directly at Marcus for the first time since he had entered the food service area. Her brown eyes showed no fear or anger, just the kind of direct attention that people gave to significant problems requiring careful handling. I wasn't trying to cause problems with you and Rodriguez, she said. I was just asking you to let go of my arm because it was uncomfortable. Marcus's anger flared at what he interpreted as continued manipulation. Don't play innocent with me. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you're going to learn about consequences. Sarah's tactical assessment updated automatically. Marcus had moved beyond verbal intimidation into direct threats, and his positioning indicated preparation for physical action. His body language showed elevated stress hormones and compromised judgment consistent with someone building toward violence. Most concerning, his decision to corner her in the food service area suggested premeditation rather than spontaneous aggression. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Sarah said, her voice remaining calm despite the escalating threat level. Maybe we should talk to your supervisor about how to resolve this professionally. The suggestion of involving his chain of command triggered exactly the reaction Sarah had anticipated. Marcus's face flushed with anger, and he stepped forward aggressively, using his size advantage to intimidate her into the corner where the coffee equipment was located. When not involving anyone else, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. This is between you and me, and it ends here and now. Sarah found herself backed against the coffee station with Marcus less than 2 feet away, his body language indicating imminent physical action. Under normal circumstances, this would have been the moment to implement defensive protocols that would end the threat in seconds. But her mission requirements demanded maintaining cover even under direct physical threat. Marcus, this isn't appropriate, Sarah said, raising her voice slightly to ensure that her surveillance equipment would capture clear audio. I need you to step back and let me continue my work. Instead of stepping back, Marcus reached out and grabbed both of Sarah's arms, pinning her against the coffee station. His grip was firm enough to prevent easy movement, and his face was close enough that Sarah could smell the coffee and aftershave that seemed to be his standard morning combination. You're going to listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, his voice low but intense. You're going to stop playing games, stop manipulating situations, and start showing proper respect. Do you understand me? Sarah's training included extensive instruction in hostage psychology and resistance techniques. She knew that Marcus was looking for submission or fear that would satisfy his need for dominance and control. Her best tactical option was to provide enough compliance to de-escalate his aggression while avoiding any responses that might escalate the situation towards serious violence. Understand, Sarah said, keeping her voice steady despite the physical restraint. Could you please let go of me so we can talk about this properly? Marcus tightened his grip slightly, enjoying the moment of complete physical control. We're talking about it properly right now. This is what happens when you cross someone who understands how things really work. The physical restraint and threatening language had moved the situation into territory that constituted clear assault under both military and civilian law. Sarah's surveillance equipment was capturing everything, and she knew that Marcus had just provided more than enough evidence for serious disciplinary action. But her mission still required maintaining cover, even if it meant enduring additional harassment. I don't want any problems with you, Sarah said, allowing a slight tremor to enter her voice to suggest the fear that Marcus was looking for. I just want to do my job and go home. The apparent fear in her voice seemed to satisfy something in Marcus's psychology. His grip relaxed slightly, and his expression shifted from anger to satisfaction. That's better. See how much easier things are when you show proper respect. Sarah nodded, maintaining the appearance of someone who had been successfully intimidated. I understand. Can I please get back to work now? Marcus released her arms, but didn't step back, maintaining his invasive proximity as a continued demonstration of control. Just remember this conversation. If you ever embarrass me again, if you ever make me look bad in front of my people, there will be consequences that go way beyond a simple talk. The threat was clear and unambiguous, captured perfectly by Sarah's surveillance equipment. Marcus had just provided evidence of harassment, assault, threatening behavior, and abuse of authority that would be more than sufficient for serious disciplinary action through both military and civilian channels. "I'll remember," Sarah said, rubbing her arms where Marcus had gripped them and continuing to project the image of someone who had been successfully intimidated. Marcus stepped back with obvious satisfaction, convinced that he had successfully resolved the situation through appropriate application of force and intimidation. In his mind, Sarah now understood the consequences of challenging his authority, and future interactions would proceed with proper respect for the military hierarchy. "Good," Marcus said, straightening his uniform and preparing to leave. "I'm glad we could clear the air about this whole situation." As Marcus headed toward the exit, Sarah returned to her food service preparations with hands that showed a slight tremor of someone recovering from a frightening experience. Her performance was flawless, exactly what Marcus would expect from a civilian contractor who had learned her place through direct demonstration of consequences. Marcus left the mess hall feeling completely satisfied with the morning's work. He had handled a difficult situation with exactly the right combination of firmness and restraint, teaching an important lesson about respect without crossing any legal lines that could cause him problems. In his mind, Sarah would now be a model contractor who understood proper military protocol. Sarah continued her breakfast service routine for another hour, serving the early morning personnel who began arriving at 0700 hours. Her demeanor remained professional and calm, showing no signs of the confrontation that had occurred earlier. The slight tremor in her hands gradually subsided as she focused on her duties, completing the picture of someone returning to normal after an unpleasant but resolved situation. At 0800 hours, Sarah completed her shift and signed out with the incoming kitchen supervisor. She collected her personal items and walked to the parking lot with the same quiet efficiency she had maintained throughout her assignment. To anyone observing, she appeared to be just another civilian contractor finishing a routine work shift. Once inside her car, Sarah sat quietly for several minutes, allowing herself to process what had just occurred. Marcus Coleman had just provided everything she needed to end his career and potentially his freedom. The surveillance footage showed clear evidence of assault, harassment, threatening behavior, and abuse of authority that would result in court-martial proceedings if reported through proper channels. But Sarah's mission was intelligence gathering, not justice for harassment victims. Marcus's behavior had provided valuable insights into his personality and judgment, but it had also revealed something potentially more significant. His willingness to act so aggressively suggested someone under significant stress or external pressure. People who committed career-ending mistakes often did so because they were already compromised in ways that made normal risk assessment impossible. Sarah started her car and drove off base while mentally composing her operational report. Marcus Coleman was now a priority target for expanded surveillance and investigation. His behavior suggested someone who might be vulnerable to recruitment by hostile intelligence services, or someone who was already engaged in activities that compromised his judgment and decision-making capability. The harassment was about to become the least of Marcus's problems, because his actions had just attracted the attention of people who operated at levels of authority that he couldn't imagine. Sarah's real identity was about to be revealed to the base command structure, but not in the way that Marcus could ever have anticipated. The consequences of crossing the wrong person were about to become very real, very quickly. Colonel James Harrison received Sarah's encrypted report at 1,347 hours on Monday afternoon, transmitted through channels that bypassed the normal base communication systems entirely. As the commanding officer of Joint Special Operations Command Intelligence Division, Harrison was one of only 6 people at Fort Bragg with clearance high enough to know about Sarah's real identity and mission parameters. Harrison had been following Sarah's investigation for 3 months, reading her daily reports with the kind of careful attention that came from 22 years of special operations experience. Her work was consistently thorough and professional, providing valuable intelligence about potential security vulnerabilities while maintaining perfect operational security. But Monday's report was different in ways that immediately captured Harrison's full attention. The surveillance footage attached to Sarah's report showed Marcus Coleman's escalating harassment campaign in detail, culminating in the morning assault that constituted clear criminal behavior. But more significantly for Harrison's purposes, Marcus's actions revealed psychological instability and compromised judgment that raised serious questions about his fitness for continued military service and his potential vulnerability to foreign intelligence recruitment. Harrison activated a secure communication protocol and contacted Brigadier General Patricia Wong at the Defense Intelligence Agency. Wong was Sarah's operational handler, responsible for coordinating her deep cover assignments and ensuring that intelligence gathered through her work reached appropriate analysis teams. She was also someone with sufficient authority to make decisions about expanding investigations when circumstances warranted additional resources. "Patricia, we have a situation at Bragg that requires immediate attention," Harrison said once the secure connection was established. "Agent Chun has identified a person of interest whose behavior suggests significant security concerns." Wong reviewed Sarah's report, while Harrison provided additional context about Marcus Coleman's background and current assignment. Coleman's access to transportation logistics systems and his regular interaction with civilian contractors made him a potentially valuable target for foreign intelligence services. His psychological instability and poor judgment made him vulnerable to recruitment approaches that more stable personnel would recognize and report. "What's your assessment of the immediate threat level?" Wong asked, studying the surveillance footage that showed Marcus's assault on Sarah. "High enough to warrant priority investigation," Harrison replied. Coleman's behavior indicates someone under external pressure or internal psychological breakdown. Either scenario presents potential security risks that go beyond simple harassment issues. Wong made the decision to activate expanded surveillance protocols for Marcus Coleman while maintaining Sarah's cover identity. Additional intelligence assets would be deployed to monitor Coleman's communications, financial transactions, and off-duty activities. If he was already compromised by foreign intelligence services, the expanded surveillance would identify his handlers and operational methods. If he was simply unstable, the surveillance would provide evidence for appropriate administrative action. "Keep Agent Chun in place for now," Wong instructed. "Her position gives us perfect observation access if Coleman is involved in espionage activities. But implement additional security protocols in case his behavior escalates towards serious violence." Harrison understood Wong's concerns about Sarah's safety, but both officers knew that her training and capabilities made her far less vulnerable than her cover identity suggested. Still, operational protocols required backup plans for any scenario where her cover might be compromised or her safety genuinely threatened. Tuesday morning brought the first results of the expanded surveillance when signals intelligence analysts intercepted several text messages from Marcus to an unregistered phone number. The messages were brief and seemingly innocuous, but the timing and pattern suggested possible coded communication with an external contact. Further analysis revealed that the unregistered number belonged to a prepaid phone purchased with cash 3 weeks earlier. Wednesday evening surveillance teams observed Marcus meeting with an unidentified individual at a bar frequented by military personnel from multiple bases in the region. The meeting lasted 47 minutes and included the exchange of a manila envelope that Marcus received from the unknown contact. Physical surveillance was unable to determine the contents of the envelope without compromising operational security. Thursday morning brought more significant intelligence when financial monitoring revealed unusual cash deposits in Marcus's personal banking account. 3 deposits of $1,500 each had been made over the past 6 weeks, always in cash, and always at different branch locations. The amounts were carefully calculated to avoid triggering automatic reporting requirements, suggesting sophisticated knowledge of banking regulations. Harrison briefed Wong on these developments during their regular Thursday afternoon communication window. The evidence was building toward a pattern consistent with espionage activity, but not yet sufficient for criminal charges or arrest authority. More importantly, they still had no identification of Marcus's potential handlers or the specific information he might be providing to hostile intelligence services. Agent Chun needs to maintain her position until we can identify the full scope of Coleman's activities, Wong decided. Her access to his behavioral patterns could be crucial for understanding his operational methods and identifying his contacts. Friday morning brought an unexpected development when Rodriguez approached Sarah during her breakfast shift. The older sergeant had been troubled by Marcus's behavior since the previous Friday's confrontation, and his concern had only grown as he observed Marcus's increasingly erratic conduct throughout the week. "Excuse me, Sarah," Rodriguez said, approaching the service counter with obvious discomfort. "Can I talk to you privately for a minute?" Sarah finished serving coffee to an early morning customer before responding. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Rodriguez glanced around the dining facility to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "I wanted to apologize for what happened last Friday with Marcus. His behavior was completely inappropriate, and I should have intervened sooner." Sarah maintained her cover identity's response pattern, showing appreciation for Rodriguez's concern while downplaying the significance of the incident. "Thank you for stepping in when you did. I don't want to cause problems for anyone." Rodriguez studied Sarah's face with the kind of careful attention that came from years of evaluating personnel under stress. "Has Marcus been bothering you since then? Because if he has, I can talk to our first sergeant about getting it handled through proper channels." The offer represented exactly the kind of external intervention that could complicate Sarah's investigation, but her cover identity demanded a response that balanced self-protection with reluctance to create military personnel problems. "He talked to me Monday morning about work standards. It wasn't pleasant, but I think he was just making sure I understood his expectations." Rodriguez's expression darkened with concern. "What exactly did he say to you Monday morning?" Sarah provided an edited version of Marcus's harassment that captured the inappropriate nature of his behavior without revealing the full extent of the assault or threats. Rodriguez listened with growing anger, recognizing the pattern of abuse that he had hoped would end after his previous intervention. "That's not acceptable," Rodriguez said firmly. "Marcus doesn't have any authority over civilian contractors, and he has no business talking to you that way. I'm going to speak with First Sergeant Martinez about this situation." Sarah's operational training included extensive instruction in managing well-meaning interventions that could compromise intelligence operations. Rodriguez's concern was genuine and his proposed action was appropriate, but involving the formal chain of command would create complications that could affect her investigation of Marcus's potential espionage activities. "I appreciate your concern," Sarah said, "but I don't want to create problems that might affect my job security. Maybe the situation will improve on its own." Rodriguez recognized the fear that many civilian contractors expressed about reporting military personnel for inappropriate behavior. Their employment status was often vulnerable to retaliation, and many contractors had learned to endure harassment rather than risk losing their jobs. But Rodriguez's military experience also told him that Marcus's behavior was likely to escalate without formal intervention. "Your job security isn't at risk for reporting harassment," Rodriguez assured her. "There are regulations that protect contractors from retaliation, and First Sergeant Martinez takes this kind of thing seriously." Sarah appeared to consider Rodriguez's offer while actually calculating the operational implications of formal military investigation into Marcus's conduct. If Marcus was involved in espionage activities, a harassment investigation might cause him to suspend his operations or contact his handlers for emergency extraction. But if the investigation could be managed carefully, it might also provide additional pressure that could force Marcus into operational mistakes. "Maybe you could talk to him informally first?" Sarah suggested. See if you can get him to back off without involving the chain of command. Rodriguez nodded, understanding her preference for resolution without formal complaints. I'll have a conversation with Marcus about appropriate professional conduct. If that doesn't work, we'll need to take it to higher authority. As Rodriguez prepared to leave, Sarah made a decision that would prove crucial for the developing operation. Sergeant Rodriguez, there's something else you should know. Monday morning when Marcus talked to me, he seemed really angry about what happened last Friday, like he'd been thinking about it all weekend. Rodriguez's concern deepened at this information. Marcus's tendency to hold grudges and escalate conflicts was exactly the kind of behavioral pattern that could lead to serious problems if not addressed quickly. I'll definitely be talking to him today, Rodriguez promised. And, Sarah, if he bothers you again before I can get this sorted out, you call base security immediately. Don't worry about creating problems. Worry about staying safe. After Rodriguez left, Sarah continued her breakfast service while processing the implications of their conversation. Rodriguez's intervention would likely cause Marcus additional stress and paranoia, psychological conditions that often led to operational mistakes by compromised personnel. If Marcus was working for foreign intelligence services, the increased pressure might force him to contact his handlers or take other actions that would reveal the full scope of his activities. Sarah's surveillance equipment had captured the entire conversation with Rodriguez, providing additional documentation of the harassment campaign while also recording her cover identity's appropriate response to the situation. The footage would be included in her daily intelligence report, along with analysis of how Rodriguez's planned intervention might affect Marcus's behavior patterns. Friday afternoon brought the confrontation that Sarah had anticipated when Rodriguez found Marcus in the motor pool area behind the Transportation Battalion headquarters. The two sergeants had worked together professionally for several months, but Rodriguez's expression indicated that their conversation would be anything but routine military business. Marcus, we need to talk about your interactions with the civilian contractor in the mess hall, Rodriguez said, positioning himself where their conversation would be private, but still within sight of other personnel for safety purposes. Marcus immediately became defensive, his body language shifting into the aggressive posture that had become his standard response to any challenge to his authority. What about it? I'm just maintaining professional standards. Rodriguez had prepared for this conversation by reviewing military regulations regarding interactions with civilian contractors, and his response was informed by clear knowledge of appropriate conduct standards. Grabbing someone's arm, cornering them in workspaces, and making them uncomfortable isn't maintaining professional standards. It's harassment, and it needs to stop. Marcus's face flushed with anger at Rodriguez's direct challenge. She complained to you? After I specifically told her this was between us. The admission that Marcus had instructed Sarah to keep their interaction secret was exactly the kind of evidence Rodriguez had hoped to avoid hearing. It confirmed that Marcus knew his behavior was inappropriate and had deliberately attempted to prevent reporting through proper channels. She didn't complain, Rodriguez clarified. I asked her about it because I was concerned about what I saw last Friday. And what she told me confirms that your behavior is out of line and needs to change immediately. Marcus stepped closer to Rodriguez, using the same intimidation techniques that had been effective with Sarah, but that would be far less successful with an experienced non-commissioned officer. Maybe you should mind your own business, Rodriguez. This doesn't concern you. Rodriguez maintained his position and met Marcus's aggressive posture with calm professionalism. It concerns me when a soldier in my unit is harassing civilian personnel and potentially creating legal problems for everyone involved. You need to leave her alone, Marcus. Completely alone. The direct order to cease all contact with Sarah presented Marcus with a choice between accepting guidance from a peer or escalating the confrontation into open insubordination. His alcohol-influenced decision-making and growing paranoia about his espionage activities pushed him toward escalation rather than compliance. Don't tell me what I can and can't do, Marcus said, his voice rising to a level that attracted attention from other soldiers in the motor pool area. I don't take orders from you. Rodriguez recognized that the situation was moving beyond simple counseling into territory that would require formal intervention. Marcus's refusal to accept guidance and his escalating aggression indicated someone whose judgment was seriously compromised. The public nature of their confrontation meant that other personnel were witnessing Marcus's inappropriate behavior, creating additional evidence of his instability. "You're right," Rodriguez said calmly. "You don't take orders from me. But you do take orders from First Sergeant Martinez, and that's who I'm talking to about this situation if you can't handle it professionally." Marcus's reaction was immediate and revealing. Instead of showing concern about formal disciplinary action, his first response was panic about the potential for investigation into his activities. His espionage work had made him hypersensitive to any official attention, and the threat of formal military investigation triggered survival instincts that had nothing to do with harassment issues. "There's nothing to investigate," Marcus said quickly. "I haven't done anything wrong." Rodriguez noted Marcus's strange emphasis on investigation rather than disciplinary action, but attributed it to general anxiety about formal military procedures. He had no way of knowing that Marcus's panic was related to concerns that went far beyond harassment allegations. "Then, you won't mind stopping all interactions with a civilian contractor," Rodriguez said. "If there's nothing wrong with your behavior, there should be no problem with avoiding situations that might be misinterpreted." Marcus found himself trapped between accepting restrictions that would interfere with his surveillance of Sarah and continuing to argue in a way that would attract the official investigation he desperately wanted to avoid. His compromised judgment and elevated stress levels made it difficult to calculate the best response to Rodriguez's ultimatum. "Fine," Marcus said finally. "I'll stay away from her. But this is ridiculous overreaction to a simple professional interaction." Rodriguez recognized the grudging compliance as the best outcome he was likely to achieve through informal intervention. "Good. And, Marcus, if I hear about any further problems, this goes straight to the chain of command. No more warnings, no more chances to handle it yourself." As Rodriguez walked away from the confrontation, Marcus remained in the motor pool area, processing what had just happened. The restriction on contacting Sarah would make it much more difficult to continue monitoring her activities, but any violation of Rodriguez's ultimatum would result in the kind of official investigation that could uncover his espionage activities. Marcus pulled out his phone and composed a brief text message to his handler. "Situation becoming complicated. May need alternate approach." The response came back within minutes. "Maintain current mission. Adapt as necessary." Marcus stared at the message for several seconds before deleting it, wondering if his handler truly understood how dangerous his situation was becoming. The pressure from multiple directions was making it increasingly difficult to maintain operational security while continuing to provide the intelligence his handler demanded. That evening, Sarah included detailed analysis of Rodriguez's intervention in her intelligence report to Colonel Harrison. Marcus's reaction to the confrontation had revealed significant anxiety about investigation and official attention that went beyond normal concern about disciplinary action. His behavior patterns were becoming increasingly consistent with someone engaged in espionage activities who was struggling to maintain operational security under pressure. The investigation was approaching a critical phase where Marcus would either be forced into operational mistakes that would reveal his espionage activities, or he would receive instructions from his handlers that might lead to more desperate actions. Either way, the situation was building toward a resolution that would have consequences far beyond the original harassment campaign. The next phase would determine whether Marcus Coleman was simply an unstable soldier or something far more dangerous. The weekend brought Marcus to a critical decision point. Rodriguez's ultimatum had effectively ended his ability to monitor Sarah through direct contact, but his handler's latest instructions demanded specific intelligence about base security protocols that he could only obtain through continued surveillance of civilian contractor activities. The contradiction between operational requirements and personal safety was driving him toward increasingly desperate measures. Saturday evening, Marcus sat in his apartment reviewing encrypted files on his personal laptop, trying to determine how much intelligence he had already provided and how much more his handler expected before concluding his assignment. The financial compensation had been substantial enough to justify the initial risk, but the escalating pressure from multiple sources was making him question whether any amount of money was worth the potential consequences of discovery. The encrypted communication from his handler that arrived at 2,347 hours Saturday night eliminated any remaining doubt about the seriousness of his situation. Primary objective requires completion within 72 hours. Secondary surveillance target showing signs of potential counterintelligence activity. Recommend immediate extraction of all available intelligence before opportunity window closes. Marcus read the message 3 times before its implications became clear. His handler believed that Sarah might be more than just a civilian contractor and wanted Marcus to obtain final intelligence before terminating his operation. The 72-hour deadline meant that Marcus would have to take significant risks to complete his assignment, potentially exposing himself to the kind of discovery that would result in treason charges. Sunday morning, Marcus made the decision that would prove to be his final mistake. Unable to approach Sarah directly due to Rodriguez's restriction, he decided to conduct surveillance of her off-duty activities to determine whether she exhibited behavior patterns inconsistent with her cover identity as a civilian contractor. If she was indeed a counterintelligence operative, her personal habits and living situation might reveal evidence that he could provide to his handler. Marcus began following Sarah when she left her apartment complex at 0847 hours Sunday morning, maintaining sufficient distance to avoid detection while documenting her activities with a telephoto lens. His surveillance training was limited to basic military protocols, making him vulnerable to the kind of counter-surveillance techniques that Sarah had mastered through years of special operations work. Sarah detected Marcus's surveillance within the first 10 minutes of leaving her apartment. Her peripheral vision caught the reflection of his vehicle in a storefront window, and subsequent tactical driving confirmed that he was maintaining consistent following distance while attempting to remain unobserved. Rather than taking evasive action that would reveal her capabilities, Sarah continued her planned activities while adjusting her route to provide better surveillance opportunities for the intelligence assets that she knew were monitoring Marcus's communications. Sarah's apparent destination was a local gym where she maintained membership as part of her cover identity. The facility was popular with military personnel and civilian contractors from Fort Bragg, providing perfect cover for someone wanting to blend into the background while maintaining physical fitness. Marcus parked across the street and prepared to wait for her to emerge, hoping that her workout routine might reveal capabilities inconsistent with her civilian contractor persona. What Marcus couldn't see was Sarah's actual workout routine, which would have immediately revealed her special operations background. Her training regimen included advanced combat conditioning, tactical movement drills, and weapons maintenance procedures that no civilian contractor would possess. But Sarah was careful to use private training areas and specialized equipment that were not visible from public locations. After 90 minutes, Sarah emerged from the gym and continued to a grocery store where she purchased basic household supplies. Her shopping patterns were carefully calculated to match the financial profile of her cover identity, avoiding any purchases that might suggest resources or preferences inconsistent with a civilian contractor's lifestyle. Marcus documented her activities with increasing frustration, finding nothing that supported his handler's suspicions about her potential counterintelligence role. Sarah's next stop was a coffee shop where she ordered a simple beverage and sat at a table near the window, apparently reading a paperback novel while casually observing foot traffic outside. To Marcus, she appeared to be enjoying a relaxing Sunday afternoon with no particular agenda or awareness of her surroundings. He had no way of detecting the sophisticated surveillance techniques she was using to monitor his position and assess any additional threats in the area. After 40 minutes at the coffee shop, Sarah returned to her apartment complex, completing what appeared to be a routine weekend outing that provided no evidence of unusual capabilities or activities. Marcus had documented everything with his telephoto lens, but had obtained no intelligence that would satisfy his handler's requirements or justify the risk he had taken by conducting unauthorized surveillance. Marcus's frustration with the unproductive surveillance mission led him to make his most dangerous decision yet. Unable to obtain intelligence through observation of Sarah's off-duty activities, he decided to attempt covert entry into her apartment to search for evidence of her real identity and capabilities. The plan was extremely risky, but his handler's 72-hour deadline was creating pressure that overcame his normal risk assessment protocols. Sunday evening at 2,130 hours, Marcus conducted reconnaissance of Sarah's apartment complex, identifying security vulnerabilities and planning his approach route for a nighttime entry operation. The complex was typical of housing used by military contractors, adequate security for normal purposes, but vulnerable to someone with basic military training and determination to gain entry. What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah's apartment was equipped with military-grade security systems that would detect any unauthorized entry attempt within seconds. More importantly, the intelligence assets monitoring his communications had intercepted his handler's message and were prepared for exactly the kind of desperate action that Marcus was planning. At 0247 hours Monday morning, Marcus approached Sarah's apartment using tactics learned from military urban operations training. He successfully bypassed the complex's basic security system and gained access to the building, but his entry was immediately detected by Sarah's enhanced security protocols. Silent alarms activated systems that simultaneously notified Sarah, base security, and the intelligence team that had been monitoring Marcus for the past week. Sarah was awake and ready when her security system detected Marcus's presence in the hallway outside her apartment. Her tactical preparation included full combat gear and weapon systems that were concealed throughout her living space, equipment that could transform her modest apartment into a fortress capable of withstanding significant assault. But her operational priorities remained focused on maintaining cover while allowing the intelligence team to gather maximum evidence of Marcus's espionage activities. Marcus succeeded in picking the lock on Sarah's apartment door, a skill learned during specialized military training that he had never expected to use against fellow American personnel. As he entered her living space, motion sensors tracked his movement while hidden cameras documented his actions with perfect clarity. The intelligence team monitoring the situation was recording everything Marcus did, building an airtight case for espionage charges that would result in life imprisonment. Sarah remained in her bedroom, monitoring Marcus's activities through concealed surveillance systems while maintaining communication with the intelligence team. Her instructions were to allow Marcus to incriminate himself fully before revealing her real identity and capabilities. The evidence he was creating through his search of her apartment would be crucial for identifying his handler and understanding the full scope of his espionage activities. Marcus moved through Sarah's living space with systematic precision, searching for documents, equipment, or other evidence that might reveal capabilities inconsistent with her civilian contractor cover. Her apartment was perfectly designed to support her false identity, containing exactly the kind of personal items and lifestyle indicators that a real civilian contractor would possess. But Marcus's handler had trained him to look for subtle indicators that might suggest intelligence training or special operations background. After 20 minutes of fruitless searching, Marcus discovered Sarah's hidden equipment cache behind a false wall in her bedroom closet. The concealed space contained communication devices, surveillance equipment, and documentation that immediately revealed her true identity as a Special Operations Intelligence officer. Marcus stared at the evidence for several seconds, realizing that his handler's suspicions had been correct and that he had been conducting harassment campaigns against someone with capabilities that made him look like an amateur. The discovery of Sarah's real identity triggered panic that overcame Marcus's remaining operational discipline. Instead of carefully documenting the intelligence and planning a strategic withdrawal, he grabbed several items from the equipment cache and prepared to leave immediately. His handler needed to know about this development as quickly as possible regardless of the personal risk involved in making contact during a compromised operation. As Marcus prepared to leave the apartment, Sarah emerged from her bedroom in full tactical gear, her appearance transformed from mild-mannered civilian contractor to elite special operations warrior. The woman who had accepted his harassment campaigns with apparent vulnerability was revealed as someone capable of neutralizing threats that would terrify most infantry soldiers. "Hello, Marcus," Sarah said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone completely in control of a dangerous situation. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what you're really doing at Fort Bragg." Marcus found himself frozen in place, his stolen intelligence items still clutched in his hands, facing someone whose real capabilities made his harassment campaign seem absurdly misguided. The woman he had thought he was intimidating was revealed as a predator who had been studying his every move while building a case that would destroy his life. "You're not a civilian contractor," Marcus said, stating the obvious while his mind struggled to process the implications of his discovery. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, Naval Special Warfare Development Group," Sarah replied, allowing him to understand exactly how badly he had miscalculated the situation. "And your Staff Sergeant Marcus Coleman, currently under investigation for espionage activities against the United States of America." The revelation that his espionage activities were already known hit Marcus like a physical blow. His handler had assured him that his operational security was perfect, but he was now facing someone who clearly knew everything about his activities and had been monitoring him while allowing him to incriminate himself further. "I want to make a deal," Marcus said desperately, recognizing that his only chance for survival lay in cooperation with the intelligence officers who had been manipulating his situation from the beginning. Sarah's expression remained professionally neutral as intelligence team members entered the apartment through the same route Marcus had used. The men and women who surrounded him wore the kind of tactical gear and carried the kind of weapons that indicated special operations capabilities far beyond anything Marcus had encountered during his regular military service. "The only deal available to you involves complete cooperation with our investigation," said Colonel Harrison, entering the apartment behind his tactical team. "You're going to tell us everything about your handler, your payment methods, your communication protocols, and every piece of intelligence you've provided to foreign agents." Marcus looked around at the assembled intelligence operatives, realizing that his espionage career was over and that his only remaining choice was between cooperation and life imprisonment. The harassment campaign that had started as petty exercise of authority had led him into a situation where his survival depended on the mercy of people whose capabilities he had never imagined. "I'll tell you everything," Marcus said, setting down the stolen intelligence items and raising his hands to show he wasn't going to resist. "But you need to understand that my handler told me there would be consequences if I was ever caught." Harrison nodded grimly, recognizing the implications of Marcus's statement. Foreign intelligence services rarely left loose ends when their operations were compromised, and Marcus's cooperation might be the only thing keeping him alive long enough to provide useful information. Over the following hours, Marcus provided detailed information about his recruitment, training, communication methods, and the intelligence he had provided to his foreign handler. His cooperation revealed an espionage operation that extended far beyond Fort Bragg, involving multiple compromised personnel and sophisticated intelligence gathering protocols that had been operating undetected for over 2 years. Sarah's investigation had successfully identified and neutralized a significant security threat, but the personal cost of maintaining her cover identity through Marcus's harassment campaign would require extensive psychological counseling to process. The mission had been successful, but it had also demonstrated the personal sacrifices that deep cover operatives made in service of national security objectives. Marcus Coleman was quietly transferred to a secure facility where he would spend the remainder of his life providing intelligence about foreign espionage operations while serving a sentence for treason. His case never appeared in public records, and his former colleagues at Fort Bragg were told only that he had been transferred to another assignment. Sarah Chun returned to her unit after completing extensive debriefing sessions about the operation and the intelligence gained through Marcus's cooperation. Her cover identity as a civilian contractor was retired, and she resumed her regular duties with SEAL Team 6, carrying with her the knowledge that some missions required sacrifices that went far beyond physical courage. The mess hall at Fort Bragg returned to its normal operations, with new civilian contractors taking over the duties that Sarah had performed during her assignment. None of the regular personnel knew that they had witnessed one of the most successful counterintelligence operations in recent military history, or that the quiet woman who had served their coffee and cleaned their tables was one of the most dangerous people in the United States military. The incident became a classified case study in counterintelligence operations, demonstrating the effectiveness of deep cover assignments and the importance of protecting operational security even under extreme personal stress. Sarah's ability to maintain her cover while gathering critical intelligence under harassment and assault became a standard that future operatives would study and attempt to emulate. For Sarah, the assignment was simply another mission completed successfully, another threat neutralized before it could compromise American security interests. The harassment she had endured was classified as an operational necessity, filed away with dozens of other experiences that came with the territory of special operations work. The truth about what happened in the mess hall would remain classified for decades, known only to a small group of intelligence professionals who understood the real cost of keeping America safe from those who would exploit its freedoms to serve hostile foreign interests. Marcus Coleman had crossed the line with the wrong person, and the consequences of that mistake would echo through intelligence circles for years to come as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you never see coming.